that all brings us to today's Big Bite, and the timing on this really couldn't be much better. It's an interesting concept, keeping historic buildings like churches and finding new uses for them. It is the ultimate recycling project, really. We had Joseph Kinski with Hamilton County Planning and Development on the show just earlier this month to talk about a recent blog post of his that posits the idea of what to do with empty churches, remember?
You know, one of the main issues, especially with religious building, because especially they're a nonprofit, when it's a really old building, you often have to do, fundraising to make certain repairs to the building, and it can be really hard to keep track of making all those repairs. And then once the building gets sold, it can end up in a disadvantaged position for the next buyer, the next developer, and they might have to make repairs that maybe should have been done 10 years ago, but weren't possible to. And so coming up with the funding to do that is certainly impressive.
So Joseph's blog post talks about all the zoning challenges that Urban Artifact dealt with in their conversion of the former St. Patrick's and then St. Pius churches into the brewery that's been slinging beer in Northside now since 2015. The post also talks about more recent moves to convert the church at Walnut and 8th downtown into space for an imaging studio out of North Carolina. It's something developers contended with when they converted a condemned 3-story church on Race near 15th into what up until recently has been Taft's Ale House that has since transformed into the Mellotone Beer Project. Ohio's governor just last week announced 37 different projects that are receiving over $86 million in tax credits for the preservation and revitalization of dozens of historic buildings all across the state. For Hamilton County, that is 15 different projects like the Atlas National Bank on Walnut near 6th Street. That is a $24 million project that's getting $3 million in tax credits in order to bring mixed income housing into downtown Cincinnati. The building is currently 93% vacant. The project will keep the commercial space on the ground floor and put in more than 6 residential units on upper floors. Also, in that same announcement is the old Alms and Depke Dry Goods Company building that takes up an entire city block downtown. Now, that is a rendering of what is to come on Central Parkway between Sycamore and Main. That big building's been there since the late 1800s. The Inquirer says it was the second largest dry goods store west of New York. That is a massive building, and that is a lot of very dry goods. It has been the County Job and Family Services building until just this year, before the department moved to Bond Hill. But with this tax credit coming from the state, $5 million on a $64 million project, developers there are also looking to put about 150 apartments in while keeping commercial space on the ground floor once again. Like the incoming Convention Center Hotel, that development is also planning a skywalk to the county-owned parking garage next door. We also have some renderings of what the rooftop event space for that building would look like. This is all being redeveloped by the Stow Development Corporation. A statement coming from CEO Scott Stow says that his family has admired this recently vacant property for over 60 years, and they're looking forward to stewarding the next chapter. The building is on the National Register of Historic Places, so Stow's company will have to make sure that they navigate that redevelopment in a very specific way. The majority of these plans to give tax breaks for historic preservation or revitalization involve adding new residential housing. That is something we know that this area sorely needs, and the idea that it's coming immediately to the central business district, downtown Cincinnati, is really encouraging. But giving tax breaks for historic building projects is something that was almost done away with by Ohio state lawmakers last year. Cincinnati commercial real estate agent Ed Mathis broke it all down about 11 months ago.
Governor DeWine takes a strong stance for Ohio. In a pivotal move for urban redevelopment, Governor Mike DeWine vetoed the budget provision that would have ended Ohio's historic provision tax credit program after 2027, delivering a major win for developers in cities like Cincinnati. This tax credit has been instrumental in rehabbing dozens of buildings in over the Rhine, fueling hundreds of millions in private investment and transforming neglected properties into housing, offices, and community anchors. I literally can't overstate how big of a deal this is, the CEO of Model Group said. The work reviving Cincinnati's urban core over the past 25 years could not have happened without it. With rising construction costs and higher interest rates, historic redevelopment is more challenging than ever. The governor's decision sends a strong message. Ohio is committed to revitalizing its city and preserving its architectural heritage.
The idea of getting rid of a tax credit that incentivizes developers to take on big projects at historic buildings seems like a good thing. And for the life of me, I really couldn't figure out why lawmakers would want to get rid of that. Did a little bit of digging. Reporting from about this time last year said the idea was a way to make up for a drop in revenue as Ohio moves to a flat income tax. But the historic tax credit is an economic development tool. It's often a way for developers to get a construction bank loan secured for a given project in order to move forward with the plan. And if that head part isn't enough for you, what about the heart? It's a way to get new use out of big old buildings that doesn't involve tearing them down for new construction. And that all seems to use the same gray and beige natural aesthetics. Lots of articles posted over just the last few years about builders cutting costs by buying materials in bulk and then repeating tried and true floor plans in modern construction, seeing those same colors and those same layouts and those same exteriors over and over again. But that's a big bite for another day.